for New York to New Zealand, our global future. My name is Sham, and I currently serve as one of the National Vice Presidents for the National Hindu Students Forum UK. And I'm pleased to welcome you all to the Hindu Experience Students Edition 2020. The National Hindu Students Forum was founded in 1991 with a vision to bring students together to protect, preserve, practice, and promote Hindu dharma. Today, NHSF societies across the country keep this vision alive. This conference, the Hindu Experience Students Edition, is a celebration of Hindu identity and how dharmic values can be integrated with everyday life to build a better world. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Hindu student leaders from across the globe to discuss the current landscape for Hindu students, what challenges that surround this landscape, and how connected we are in the response to these challenges, and therefore how we create future leaders globally. It's an honor to present to you our speakers for this session. Our first panelist is Jminji Kataria. He works as a postdoctoral fellow at the University of California, San Francisco Medical School. He's been involved in various culture and volunteering organizations since a very young age and currently serves as the Vice President of Hindu Yuva over in the USA. Our second panelist is Nitika G. Sharma. Professionally, she's a Senior Manager, Innovation and Growth Advisory at KPMG New Zealand, where she's also part of the steering committee for the Ethnic Network. She's been working with the global Hindu youth movement for the last 10 years, and she's current coordinator of Hindu Students Youth Network and former president of Hindu Youth New Zealand. Next, we have Arnavji Kejriwal. He graduated from the University of Washington with a degree in political sciences and economics. He serves as the president of the Hindu Students Council. Arnavji has also published several youth papers in the World Association for Vedic Studies, presenting at global conferences in Trinidad and Tobago, New Jersey, and Iowa. Last but not least, we have Drishti May. Drishti graduated in chemistry from the University of York and currently works in technology strategy at Unilever. She's been serving as the national president of the National Hindu Students Forum since 2017. A very warm welcome and namaste to you all. Just a reminder for all of those watching and tuning in at the moment, that if you have any questions that you'd like to have answered by our panel, please ask them via the YouTube live chat. And if time permits, we'll hopefully put some of these forward to our speakers towards the end of this session. But if not, fear not, we will look to address them offline if we're unable to address them as part of this panel. So before we dive into discussion, I'd like to start by setting some context for the audience watching at home who may not be familiar with all of the organizations represented on our panel today. So it'd be great to hear from each of you the origins of your organization and how it's evolved into what we see today. It'd be great to start with you, Arnavji.
Namaste, and thank you, Sham, and thank you to the NHSF for hosting this. It's such a pleasure to be on a panel with student leaders and organization leaders from all over the world, and literally New Zealand to New York. So yeah, Hindu Students Council is the largest and the oldest Hindu student and youth network in North America. So HESC was founded back in 1990, and as you can imagine, at that time, the context on campus was a little different, right? So on campuses, you had a lot of students coming from India that were looking for opportunities for undergraduate or master, more so graduate programs. And HESC for them was something that they launched as a way to stay connected to their Hindu roots, to their Hindu dharma. They came from a knowledgeable background and they were looking to build a community kind of like what they had back at home. So how has that evolved over the past 30 years of HESC's existence? Well, for the last 15, 20 years, we've had a lot of students that now start to identify as American. They were born in this country or Canadian, right? We have a lot of Canadian chapters as well, and they identify with their Western culture more so than maybe their Indian or their kind of whatever ethnic background they might come from. They identify more with those roots. So HESC is a community for Hindus from all over the world, not just from India, but kind of a pan-Hindu experience where students can come together and celebrate their shared Hindu identity, become empowered to discuss, promote, and kind of defend Hindu Dharma in a lot of ways, and discuss maybe human rights issues or other issues of global importance surrounding Hindu Dharma, and then also give back to the community through seva. So we have around 40 to 45 chapters across North America. And the reason that number's varying right now is because we've just launched a high school initiative where we now bring HSE chapters to high school now that students are being expected to provide leadership skills at a much younger age, get them on their resume before they enter college. So we now are at about 5 or 6 high school chapters that are in the works. But most of the HSE chapters exist at the undergraduate level at major institutions across North America. So, some of the activities that we do, especially before COVID, are chapter led, such as, a lot of our chapters host events that are festival driven. So they cover most of the major festivals such as Diwali or Holi, Navratri, but we kind of encourage our chapters to go beyond that, right? Not just celebrating the big events, but also hosting discussions, becoming a true kind of nuanced understanding of the Hindu identity that goes beyond just celebrating of the major festivals, also having discussions, having seva events, bringing speakers to campus, having interfaith dialogues with other religious groups on campus. We want to show that there's much more to being Hindu than just maybe going to mandir or conducting puja, which is a lot of the background that students have. So that's kind of HSC's mission and how it's evolved over the past 30 years.
Awesome, thank you very much. It's really great to hear how HSC's evolved over the years, but also that you're expanding into high schools as well. It's really, really fantastic to hear. Let's move over to New Zealand, Nithikaji.
Namaste. Thank you so much, Shyamji. So Hindu Youth New Zealand, I was kind of hoping that I'd be one of the last people to speak so that I could actually say that we're the youngest of the lot. But we have actually started out in 2005. So we are one of the younger Hindu youth organizations in comparison to everyone else who is on the panel. And then I'll come back to talking about Hindu Students in Youth Network as well. And that's again one of the younger version, a younger network as well, which started in 2010 to bring all of us globally together. But to talk about Hindu Youth New Zealand, a lot of the work that we do, the main focus of Hindu Youth New Zealand is to work to strengthen the Hindu identity in New Zealand, bring together all the Hindu organizations, Hindu youth organizations, help position us strongly, and also to develop leadership capabilities in our young people, in young Hindus, so that they're able to represent the Hindu viewpoint and deal a lot more with the government agencies and with everyone else around in New Zealand to help form the view of what young Hindus are like today, living in a very diverse New Zealand. So the whole idea is to capture the journey of young people right from when they're at school, and then when they go into campus, then we've got a New Zealand Hindu Students Forum where they then interact with on-campus activities, and then they come out, and as young professionals, then they have got activities that they can engage in. So a lot of the stuff that we do in New Zealand is around the youth conferences, and that helps us do all our interactions with government agencies and with other organizations in New Zealand, a lot of seminars, quiz, all the fun things, Diwali, yogathon on campus, meditation activities. And at the moment with COVID, the focus has shifted a lot onto helping our young people build capability, whereby we help them do CVs, career planning, workshops. So that's the current focus. But a lot of the things that we also do is around helping young people in New Zealand get into government careers, police recruitment seminars, all the other government, working for Ministry of Foreign Affairs, how to live in New Zealand, if they're particularly international students with all their visa applications, etc. So that's New Zealand. And I know I'm not doing ourselves justice because I do want to use a little bit of my time to talk about the Hindu Students in Youth Network. And that started in 2010 with the whole idea of bringing together all of us, because there's a lot of us around the world, all the Hindu students and youth organizations that exist on campus, that exists off campus. So the whole idea was to bring us all together so that we could network, get to know each other, do more things like this so that we can connect, inspire, and share these great ideas of what we're doing. And HSYN is all about creating that global platform for youth, by youth, so that we are creating global Hindu ambassadors, and we are all capable of representing Hindu viewpoints on Hindu matters, as well as things that are of topical issues in whichever country we are, regardless of our socio-political situation and our identities, geographical identities. We're able to communicate that Hindu viewpoint in an articulate and in a clear manner.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Nithikaji, for that introduction. It's fantastic to actually hear about the development of the youth through all the way through campus and even onto career and helping them long term. It's really brilliant to hear. Let's move on to the UK, to home. T.H.E.S.E.
Namaste, everyone. So similar, I think, to the atmosphere and the climate that HESC began in, NHSF, the National Hindu Students Forum, was founded in 1991. And I think for those of you at home who've been tuning into the sessions will already know, our simple but vital mission, and that is to preserve, protect, practice, and promote Hindu dharma across campuses in the UK. That's still our mission, and it's still very much alive across almost half the universities in the UK, with a whole host of weekly activities taking place. But to answer your question fully, how did we start and what climate did we start in? And I think similar to the US, we had an environment where our challenges were around unifying Hindu students, those that were first generation and second generation and beyond. What is it that they would connect with? What resonated with them? It was a time where words like the Upanishads, the Vedas, the Gita, belonged more so to the mandir than a university campus or even, your dinner table at home. Identity was something that had become distant. It wasn't something that we owned. And, we may argue that that's still a challenge that we have today, but it was very much felt by students in 1991 who then decided that they were going to do something about it. So we had a handful of students come together to say, we're going to graduate with something more than the common experience, who set about founding the National Hindu Students Forum. And over the years, it's grown. We've shifted our attention. It started off with a focus on unifying the Hindu student community. We then moved on to 10 or so years of education. So what does it mean to be Hindu? What do I need to know? What should I focus on? So on and so forth. And over the last less than 5 years or so, we've been shifting more so to being Hindu, living Hindu. How do we integrate our identity and our dharmic values into everything that we do? Hence this conference. So in the recent years, our activities have centered around how do we cultivate a civic mindset, which then goes on to not just affect the campus feel, the activities, but goes on to nurture a civic sense that we take even beyond the university sphere. How do we start to own our identity? So, implementing some linguistic hygiene with some of the phrases and the terms that we have in Sanskrit, to then the linguistic frameworks that we use to articulate what dharma is. What does it mean to be a Hindu? So owning our language is really important. We have initiatives like Sanskrit Word of the Month that have been active for the last 3 years as well, as a starting point for this. Beyond that, we've been focusing still on Sangathan. So what is it that unites us? And, really reaching beyond just the common student activities to, very similar to New Zealand, to build relationships, to increase our opportunity for sampark, and have more people invested in the Hindu student experience, from the community to the student unions to the vice chancellors. Everyone has a part to play in investing in the student journey. And finally, one of our areas that we've been focusing on for the last couple of years has been ahimsa. More relevant now, I think, more than ever. Ahimsa to the mind, ahimsa to the environment, and ahimsa to the body. So a lot of our weekly activities, from sports to dhyan to promoting yoga in an authentic sense, as well as, looking at opportunities for swadhyay, introspection, and understanding our history as well have been all part and parcel of our activities, very much in the hope to, as I said before, developing a civic sense, providing opportunities for young people in how we can organize and how we can contribute to society. How do we come together as a collective and see the common threads that bind us? Nurturing that leadership potential and representing nationally and hopefully even beyond that to international shores as well. So that's a short summary, I hope, of how NHSF has transformed and what we are here to do and hope to continue doing.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, T.H.E.S.E. And last but not least, Jminji.
Namaste. Thank you so much for the NHSF. It's kind of exciting to be part of this international panel. And I really appreciate people who are coming from, especially New Zealand, the fact that it's godforsaken hour at the time. So I'll talk a little bit about Hindu Yuva. Hindu Yuva stands for, the Yuva part of it stands for Youth for Unity, Virtues and Action. And, I think we might be the youngest kid on the block. We started in 2006. And similar to NHSF, our aim is also to practice, promote, protect, and preserve Hindu Dharma on university campuses. Currently, we have 36 chapters in North America, with majority of them being in the US. And we are all on university campuses. And one of the things that we focus as part of Hindu Yuva is on the how and not the what, or in the process and not the outcome. And the reason for that is that we like to bring together and evolve together to individually and eventually become confident young Hindus that we can make a purposeful and long-lasting difference in the society or the societies that we all live in. And we try to achieve that in three different aspects. One of them is being a cultural Hindu. So a lot of our activities are focused around celebrating our festivals, and not just celebrating festivals for so that others can learn, which is an important aspect of celebrating festivals. But also so that we can practice our own rituals, our own traditions that we all come from. And that is part of being a cultural Hindu, where we can be more aware of where we come from, what are our own individual practices. The second part that I think a lot of young Hindus are really curious about, which is being a spiritual Hindu. So for that, we have a lot of temple visits, we have discussions, talks, and importantly, we also encourage practicing various elements of Hindu Dharma, both individually and in a community. And then the reason why I say that and emphasize on this individual experience as well as community experience is because we can all kind of look inwards, which is what a lot of dharmic faiths tell us to do, but we can also continue to learn from others who also look inwards. And then that kind of practice can come from when we do that in a community practice. The third one is being a social Hindu. I think right now is as important as ever to be socially aware of what goes on around us, both locally and globally. So part of that, we have several activities around creating social awareness about Hindu Dharma, as well as how Hindu Dharma can contribute to the larger dialogue. So Hindu Awareness Week, interfaith dialogues, and various service activities are some of the things that we encourage. And one of the things that we did during the pandemic, especially in the US, is that we built a student support network. We got together with 3 other organizations. We built a student support network where we had a 15 hours a day, 7 days a week helpline. And we were able to help more than 1,000 students through various activities as part of this network. And I think that really speaks to how we have evolved. I know the question was, where do we come from? How did we start? And the reason why I kind of bring that towards the end is because we started in 2006, and that was the time when a lot of immigrants in the US, immigration kind of happening in 2 different phases. In the late 80s, mid 90s, and early 2000s, a lot of Indians came on work visas. and they came with their families, and their children were growing up and then going into various universities. And not only that, as Arunji was mentioning, a lot of Indian students were also coming onto various campuses, primarily for graduate programs. So there was this really, as Arunji mentioned, there was a need for developing this community environment on campus. But there was a kind of like a dilemma that I'm a first generation immigrant versus I'm first generation born Hindu-American or Hindu-Canadian. We are so different because our identities are in many ways so different. And a lot of churning was happening at the time, and a lot of people kind of who felt strongly that despite all those apparent and important differences of which country we were born in, how we grew up, what were our underlying values as growing up as a youth, the dharmic values can really be a uniting factor. And I think with that thought, Hindu Yuva was started. And from the beginning, one of the, I guess, unique thing as well as also awesome thing in some ways is that we have had equal representation of both zero-th generation, the first generation immigrants, first generation Americans, and now also second generation Americans slowly coming into it. And I think that really speaks to that when we talk about the Student Support Network or some of the other service activities, is that we don't anymore kind of look, hey, I'm a second generation Hindu American or something like that. Why do I need to worry about immigrants who are coming from India or any other country? I think that really speaks to the fact that we were able to unite all of them together to bring them all on the same platform, so to speak.
Absolutely. I think it's really inspiring to hear the foundations of each of these Hindu student movements. I think it's really interesting, I guess, to hear about some of the overlaps, I guess, in activities that we conduct. But I think importantly, I think the similarity of our why, I think all of us mentioned in one way or another that we're here to protect, preserve, practice, and promote dharma in some way. But also in terms of looking ahead to the future and nurturing Hindu students to go on and become leaders within society, I think it's clear to see, I guess, across all of us that this is a clear focus or a clear purpose of our organizations. One thing I found really thought-provoking, which I'd like to, I guess, explore a little bit further, is the challenges, both past and present, that some of you mentioned in your introductions. So if we could hone in on this a little bit further, what would each of you say is the most pressing issue facing a Hindu student on campus right now? Let's start with Arunji.
Sure, Shyamji. So I think if from an organizational perspective for HSE, the biggest challenge is the proliferation of student groups on campus. So I'm sure this is true of pretty much, any campus around the world now, but students can start a student group for pretty much any reason they want, right? So all you need is a couple of students, some kind of justification, and then you go to the student body and ask them to start a group. And the reason that that's a challenge for HSE is because all of the students that are in our target audience, we have not yet convinced them that it's their Hindu identity that they should be proud of, right? So they grow up with a large cross-section of identities, right? Many of them might be Indian. Some of them might call themselves Bengali or Telugu or whatever it might be, right? So they might think, okay, I should be part of the Bengali Student Association. Or some of them might say, okay, I should be part of the South Asian Student Organization on campus, right? So in some way, they want some kind of cultural tie, whether it's Hindu, Indian, South Asian. They don't know how they want that to manifest. And the challenge we have on campus is that many students, especially those who, let's start with the ones that come from a Hindu background, those ones come to campus a little innocent in the sense that they're looking for some kind of way to celebrate things like Diwali, which come up a few months into their semester, or go to a Garba, which they're used to going back at home. And they see that the Indian Student Association is throwing this event, or the South Asian Student Association. Well, they go and it's got a lot of the similarities that maybe an HSC event will have, but the difference is there might not be a murti in the center, right? There might be an after party where there's alcohol present, right? So these little differences get manifested, but the more broadly speaking, the Indian and the South Asian student associations and anything of those sorts tend to take a lot of the events that groups like HSC, NHSF, Yuva, the HSYN, these groups kind of rely on those festivals to draw in a lot of Hindu students. And when those events get taken but kind of appropriated, it's the biggest challenge we face. Our challenge is that students expect that those events are going to be the centerpiece of their organization. So if they don't get to throw that event, it's very tough to then convince them they should still be part of HSC, right? So in a situation where we're not able to host a Garba on a particular campus, we have to work with those student leaders who are in their early 20s on finding other avenues for bringing students to campus, right? Maybe a conference or any kind of event, speaker series, career-related talks. So that's our biggest challenge, is navigating that kind of, how do we show people that we're different from an Indian or South Asian student association, and how do we make sure that we don't fall in the trap of just trying to do what they do or kind of slowly turn into one of those groups.
Awesome. Jminji, would you agree with what Arnavji's just said in terms of the biggest challenge facing Hindu students on campus right now?
Yeah, I think what Arnavji mentioned, I think as an organization, I think absolutely that the flagship festivals of any practicing Hindu should be practiced and should be celebrated in a Hindu way. I think that's like the essence of it. But I think that's as an organization that we do face that challenge. But as a Hindu student on campus, I would like to think that the challenges are really broadly two. You can put them in two different categories, one being internal and other being external. And internal being that, who am I as a Hindu student on campus? I think that question is just so fundamental to a Hindu identity, to practicing it on campus and not knowing the answers to that. And not because we are just unaware, that's part of it, but there is no environment where we can actually begin to answer that question. And I think that particular part, and that ties in with what Arunji was mentioning, is that number of Hindu festivals not being celebrated in a traditional Hindu way, then that also reduces yet another avenue, or in many university chapters, only avenue where they could explore the answer to that question. And the other being external is that Hindus or Hindu students or Hindus around, especially in the Western countries, are generally the objects of the conversations. People are talking about Hindus, people are talking about Hindu dharma, people are talking about Hindu students, so on and so forth. But we have not yet become the subjects of the conversation. We are not contributing to the conversation. And I think that particular challenge that we see, there are a lot of young Hindu students who are extremely confident, they're really skillful, and they're extremely strong in their identity and are able to contribute, but they feel that they are alone. And I think that loneliness is really strong in Hindu students. We are not part of we are not the subjects of the minority conversations in the West. We're not subjects of the various human rights conversations that go on around the world. We are always the objects. And I think that particularly the external challenge that's there is pretty strong for Hindu students.
I'd like to just bring in Drishti as well. Would you agree that these are the challenges which have been mentioned so far, the biggest or the most pressing challenge facing Hindu students globally?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I think in terms of what we experience from the UK, you probably saw me nodding along. There's so much that is relatable. When I think about, some of the activities that we see, so Holi, our Diwali balls, they're really central to the student experience. It's what a lot of young people look forward to when they join university. Indeed, we hear about some students selecting their universities based on the type of Hindu society that is present. So completely agree that, these are central. I definitely agree that we're also starting to see, a concrete movement, slowly but surely, of cultural appropriation creeping in. So what does this mean? What does this look like? It can start off with the Hindu society owning Holi celebrations. It then moves on to maybe organizations or student bodies saying, we'll host it with you, we'll give you some support. To then moving on to the student union will own it. But now your values, your Hindu values, they don't belong in this arena because we're now hosting it. So your policies need not apply. We're going to turn this into a party, but it'll still be Holi. And suddenly that's attracting a larger crowd. And that's happening. And at the same time, the bigger challenge that I think we would point to is the Hindu response, student response. And I think, Jminji spoke about, who am I as a Hindu? That question, that central question, is what we are here to explore, because this lack of identity and understanding of what it means to be Hindu leads to an apathy. It can lead sometimes to a sense of inferiority. Someone else is telling me who I am, what my values are, rather than me being able to proudly articulate them. So absolutely agree on those. I think, we'd go further to call out one more challenge, which is this change in atmosphere on campus, this fear to criticize, this fear to express, mainly because there are ideas coming up about, all values are equal, including having no values. And when that idea starts to take shape and, really start to grow on campuses, it can be really difficult to be able to articulate age-old Hindu ideas that are still relevant today, that are so central to our Hindu identity. And I fear that it's causing a lot of confusion for young people. It confuses the waters in terms of distilling what the Hindu identity actually is. So absolutely agree. I think we see all of these challenges. And I think, we're seeing a lot more in terms of the dialogue and the ability to express and own our identity being the root there.
Yeah, absolutely. Nithikaji, obviously, there's a lot of similarity in terms of what's been mentioned from the US and the UK. Would you say this is also the case in New Zealand? Does it translate over there as well?
Definitely. So a lot of what we talked about, everyone's been talking about exactly very similar issues that we face in New Zealand. There's a few other things in New Zealand in terms of when we talk about on campus, particularly because it's important to understand we are a smaller country geographically as well by numbers. And so therefore there's two distinct groups of young Hindus in the country. So one is our people who already are here, so they're born here, either first generation, second generation, so they're already here. And then the second one are the students who are international students who are coming in. So for the cohort that is already here, they generally just stay at home. So they are attending university. They're living at home. They don't necessarily leave home. So their mandir, their youth group that they used to go to, whatever they used to do, the Bal Vikas, the classes, the language classes, nothing changes. You're still at home. You're still with your parents, and therefore you're continuing to do that. You're continuing to grow that identity that you've always grown with, as opposed to, whereas I know that in UK, when you go away, you're away from home, you're looking for that belonging. So for that first group, that's not happening because you're still at home. And that presents a huge challenge of the unification, because we're coming through as a lot of that geopolitical identity or that linguistic identity or a sect-based identity that becomes bigger than the Hindu identity, and therefore to come together as Hindus becomes a bigger challenge than it does if you're on campus, where that identity is not diluted, but perhaps not as strong because your 10 friends that you used to hang out with are still there. So that's an important one for us. And that probably also explains why our Hindu Youth New Zealand does more in the country as opposed to the Students Forum, which is on-campus activities, because on-campus activities are slightly more different to perhaps some of my other friends who are on this call. So that unified Hindu identity then presents that issue of the unified Hindu voice, of what is the unified Hindu voice? Who is speaking for me, and why are you speaking for me? What gives you the right to speak for me? No, but this is not who I am. This doesn't represent my viewpoint. And so therefore, a lot of time needs to be invested in bringing us all together. And only when we know each other and network, only then we feel comfortable to speak the same language, to have that confidence that all of us do have each other's best interest at heart. So that's that one cohort. And then the second cohort is the international students who are coming in New Zealand. We do get a 2 to 3 year job search visa as you come in to study here as an international student. And so therefore, I want to be part of an organization which will help me establish myself in the country. So you're coming into the country, you're studying, and you want a good job, you want to get your permanent residency, you want to stay here. And does that come through from who I'm associating myself with? If I associate myself with a Hindu organization, how does that set me back? Does that set me back? So these are some of the questions that are going through people's minds. And then a lot of the time, being Hindu is not seen as being cool. Why would I want to embrace my Hindu identity and wear it on my forehead, on my sleeve, wherever? Because how is this? This is not what I've left home for. So along with all the other things everyone's talked about, even the festivals, which is such a common thread amongst all of us, that festival is, but mum made me do this when I was at home. I'm in New Zealand now. Who's here to keep watching me? I can celebrate the festival however I want it to be, and I'm here to have that New Zealand experience of the festival, and this is what it's about. So and people don't know what good looks like, or what great looks like, what a good dharmic Hindu festival celebration looks like. And so a lot of the I know I'm going into some of the things we do, but then a lot of the times we need to think about how do we make people aware of what grand looks like in a dharmic way, in a good, in the Hindu way, and therefore they'll be able to buy into this. The who, why, what it means to be Hindu is very common, as everyone has said, and then it's not cool to be that, and it's not setting me up for what I'm here to do. So I'm actually going to stop there for now.
I think it's really interesting, I guess, to hear all of your thoughts on what the challenges facing Hindu students are. And I think the word identity screamed through loud and clear there through all of your points. And we've spoken a little bit about this lack of Hindu identity and how this actually manifests on campus through some of the events that we see, or some of the celebrations of our utsavas that we see, which may be misappropriated. But one of the questions which has come in from the audience, and it's, I think, a really great question, is, and I know you're starting to allude to it there, Nithikaji, in an ideal world, what does the future of championing Hindu identity on campus look like? Is there something that's more effective than others, or is there methods which may work better than others in doing this? Drishti-ji.
It's a great question. And I think there's no real straightforward or easy way to answer this. And the response, or the way around not answering that directly, I think, is within our heritage. If we think of the different yogas, there are different people who have different interests, that have different ways to connect to dharma and to the truth. And that means that the responsibility that we have on this call, that the responsibility anyone who's taking up the mantle for the Hindu cause has, is that we must be flexible and be able to communicate and to develop in multiple ways, right? So we will absolutely have to focus on culture on campus. So very much what Nithikaji was talking about, what are the expectations and then what is available? We have to be able to meet that. Some of it will have to be about awareness and campaigns that we run. And some of it will be about marrying fun, what is social, with just that 10% improvement, that 20% improvement, so that over time we can inch closer and closer to what a grand dharmic utsav might look like. And that is if we want to take everyone with us in particular. And that's the way that we at NHSF have approached this. So when we think about language and we talk about owning our identity, you know, one of the ambitions that we have is that we want every young Hindu person to be able to say, I am Hindu, without justifying it with the word but thereafter. You know, why is it that we have to say, I'm Hindu, but I don't worship cows. I'm Hindu, but I'm not religious. I'm Hindu, but I'm kind of Hindu by default. You know, there's all these sorts of variations that, you know, I can see the smiles on this call, but I know that many people, especially from the polls that we've done, relate to that. Why is it that we have to have that justification? So one of our aims is to try and develop a culture on campus where young people are confident enough to say, I'm Hindu. If you have any misconceptions, that's not on me, right? And let me educate you, or let me share with you how I am Hindu, and how I am Hindu might be different to how Arnavji is Hindu, to how Jminji is Hindu, so on and so forth. And there's beauty in that pluralism, there's beauty in that diversity. How do we do that? So one of the things that we've been doing, as you know, and I mentioned at the start, is focusing on language. Can we clean that up? And so we do that in multiple ways. So on campus, all of our events, we now look to promote more authentic language. So we will use Bhagwan instead of God. We will use Shri instead of Lord. And we're adding definitions, or we're clarifying what these terms mean, so that we're not stuck with the poor inherited definitions that we have as legacy definitions. We then go on to go further and further. So, you know, we had a talk earlier on in this conference. What is a Hindu? Who is a Hindu? Is it a religious identity? Is it a civilizational identity? So we've got cleaning up our language, raising awareness in that sense, but then also marrying that up with experiences on campus. So I'm not answering your question directly, Shyamji, but I guess what we're saying is we have to be able to respond in multiple ways to attract and speak to and be effective to the variety that we have in Samaj, but also only ever be so much ahead of the Samaj. We can't be too far apart. Otherwise, we're not relatable, we're not relevant, and we won't speak to our student Samaj that we're here to serve.
Yeah. I guess as well, just some of those small changes that we can make, obviously they'll make a difference in the longer term, but I guess in order to actually create a stronger sense of identity and cause this step change amongst future generations, I guess it happens over time. It's not something which just happens overnight. And I guess over time, or what the challenge which comes with time is that we could be susceptible to, I guess, forces of resistance in some way. So Jminji, I'd like to bring you in here. Do you feel that you faced any resistance in some way, shape or form towards the efforts that Hindu Yuva are making to, I guess, make this step change and build this stronger sense of Hindu identity within students?
Yeah, I think in terms of the challenges or resistance, really, you know, Hindu Yuva being a relatively young organization, last 15 years, I think on a national scale, we haven't really faced any huge resistance, but our modus operandi really is also not really do a lot of big national events. It's really through the grassroots work. And at the grassroots work, yes, we do face the challenges or the resistance. But a lot of this resistance is also from other Hindus who are not confident or not sure about why is it that we need a Hindu organization on campus. That's a resistance, that's a challenge. A lot of other resistance that we face is kind of anytime you, unfortunately, anytime you kind of, as Nikitaji was mentioning, that if you wear your Hindu identity on your sleeve, it's kind of looked down as that, why are you being so narrow-minded? And which I think is kind of like an oxymoron, if you will. I mean, how can you be a Hindu and also narrow-minded? That just doesn't work. As Rashid, you mentioned, I think the idea of diversity, the plurality, I think if any religions has espoused is the Hindu Dharma. And I think, so in terms of resistance, we, so far, we have been very fortunate that we don't face a lot of organized resistance. However, we do face resistance in the social media. We do face the resistance in the public narrative, which makes our work of creating this confident Hindu individual as well as community identity much more difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. I think at this point it's good to look back at our conversation. I think we've established now that there's a commonality in terms of why we're here as an organization, the challenges we face, and even potentially the forces of resistance towards some of our work. I guess with this in mind, one has to ask, how connected are we in our efforts? And is there an opportunity for us to collectively do more to impact the landscape of Hindu students worldwide? Arnavji, what are your thoughts on this?
I think this question is probably better suited for Nitikaji with the HSYN, but I think a lot of us met back in there was a World Hindu Congress back in 2014, I want to say. I wasn't at that one, but I was at the 2018 Congress. And that was the first time I'd been part of a global movement to bring together Hindu leaders and organizations from all over the world and really demonstrate to the leaders that, kind of like exactly what Drishti was saying, you need to be a little well-rounded, and there's no one path to Hindu Dharma, right? So some of us are taking the education path, some of us are taking the bhakti path, right? But a lot of us might not realize that there's this karma yogi path as well that we should be kind of focusing on. How do we improve change in the societies that we're a part of? How do we strengthen the global Hindu Samaj? So that was, I think, kind of a landmark opportunity for HSC to be part of, in understanding that there's all of our sister organizations right on this call that we've really not done very much with. Now, I think the second thing that's really spurring a lot of the kind of like interconnectedness that you're talking about is also COVID. Well, COVID has been negative in a lot of ways. One of the silver linings has been that things like Zoom have become mainstream. And, I think we're starting to see chapters in the US start to open up and realize that they're more interconnected than just maybe the bubble that they live in on campus. And my hope is that the next step is that we start opening up our borders and saying, look, we're not just kind of a American or Canadian Hindu student organization, right? We're part of a larger global network of Hindus from around the world that have different viewpoints, come from different ethnic backgrounds. We can start to host events together. I think the biggest challenge is making sure work out, because the only way that this is working out is Nitikaji's up at 3 a.m. in her homeland. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if I'm answering your question, Shyamji, but I definitely think there's huge opportunities given the similarities we all have. We're all in English-speaking countries. Most of us are born in these countries, but we still carry the pride for our Hindu heritage. So there's certainly room for us to do stuff together.
Wonderful. I know you mentioned this would be a good question for Nitikaji as well. So Nitikaji, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Sure. So definitely there is a need for all of us to come together, to connect more, inspire each other more, and to share our ideas. We started out talking about the challenges and the landscapes that we've navigated as our organizations in our own country. I would actually like to talk a little bit about the challenges of HSYN as well. So in 2010, when the idea of the World Hindu Congress was born, at that time, the whole idea of let's create this global Hindu students and youth network. So it started out in 2010, and then the first World Hindu Congress happened in 2014. Between then, there was a conference in Bali, and there might be some people on this watching us today who might have been a part of that as well. And for quite a lot of us, that was a life-changing event, because that brought a lot of us together, and we got to know each other a lot more of who we are and where we are. And through this whole, although I've talked about our identity and our coming together in our own individual places, but even when starting out with HSYN in 2010 up until 2015-16, there was a lot of, why do we need this? Is there a need for this? Is there a need for this global organization? But hang on, but why is that identity is going to become bigger than my identity? I don't know. My UK identity would disappear. And are you trying to absorb NHSF UK? Are you trying to absorb Hindu Youth Australia? What is happening here? That whole, and so that landscape, like we talk about why do you need a Hindu students organization on campus if there is an Indian student organization? And these are people like ourselves as well. So to see that has come so far from 2010 to today. We're in 2020, and we're now actively kind of going, we need to be doing this more. We need to be talking to each other more. We need to be sharing resources. We need to be, our challenges are similar. So we need to come to help each other navigate through the challenges. If you've done something, just share that with us, or tell me how you've done it. It'll help us. We can invest that same thinking into not just solving the problem, but actually thriving from it, to not just get to step 1, but we'll use what you've already done to help us to get to step number 3. So those sorts of things. So it's slowly but surely happening. And something I started to say at the beginning, and I cannot say that enough, is sometimes we ourselves don't see what big, what great, what an awesome functioning Hindu society looks like. That vividhata mein ekta, maintaining your UK student identity, your Australian student identity, your in New Zealand youth identity, student identity, whatever you're doing on campus in your own countries, that can stay, and we can come together and do all of that. So being able to see that, and being able to hear that from everyone, and globally we're saying we definitely need this. We need a way to have more of these conversations, to have more of the whatever it takes, whatever shape or form it takes. Let's evolve it together. Let's all work together to evolve it. That's definitely a step in the right direction. And just in the last 10 years, a lot of shift has happened, and I'm very confident that the next 10 years will see a much more monumental shift in how we operate as global Hindu students and youth around the world.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Unfortunately, time is slowly running away from us. And I know we've only basically just scratched at the surface of some of the challenges, what we're here for, but also what our future looks like. And so I guess before we call this this session to an end, I think it would be great to hear from all of you. And I guess the main question which I'd like to ask or finish with is, say if you were starting university again now as a fresher or a freshman, knowing what you know now, what advice would you give yourself to navigate through this landscape? Let's start with Jminji.
That was a while ago. But I think it's important, it's always nice to look back upon 10, 15 years and then what you've learned and how you can at least improve upon what you did potentially. So I think what I would tell myself is to be okay with my own doubts. 1, to be okay in seeking out help from others who may or may not be Hindu. 3, be okay when others tell you that you are a weird type of Hindu, and then so be that. And more importantly, 4, is that we are not alone, that I'm not alone, even though on my own campus, I may feel like that I'm the only one who is thinking about, I'm the only one who is questioning whether I'm a Hindu, whether do I need to do something about it? How is it that I can change certain narratives that are going around with my own friend circle? And one thing I've come to realize is that almost every individual who is coming into campus is struggling with the same exact set of questions. And I think reaching out and really be with others, as I think Drashti mentioned, is that really trying to find the essence of what unites us, and everything else is the manifestation of the same exact essence, but different. And I think celebrating that difference and it is going to be really a great key, or almost in some ways fundamental key in bringing people together. So I think it's really kind of just telling ourselves what is it, to be okay with what our own identities, struggles, success stories may be, just being okay with ourselves.
Thank you. Arnoji.
Well, that was very, very well said, Jminji. So I guess I would echo a lot of what he said, but I'll just focus on point number 4, that we're not alone. I'm fortunate that I knew that I came from a very rich, long-standing heritage of kind of what our Hindu history brings to us. but I did feel that sense of loneliness on campus because very few people on campuses where there's not an HSC chapter or any kind of Hindu group, there's very few people that actually call themselves Hindu. There's many that want to call themselves Indian or something else, but when you want to discuss anything about going to the mandir or talking about something that's happening to Hindus around the world, they don't want to hear it. And there is that sense of loneliness, that sense of, I have no one to talk about this with. What's the point of starting an organization on campus? You know, how do I connect with someone that actually wants to do a little bit more meaningful discussion on my Hindu identity and not just talk about, oh, let's go to the Diwali party next week. So, you know, I really wish I knew that there were these rich networks, not just within each of our countries, but globally. I graduated back in 2014, and in the last 5-6 years, I've really learned what a rich global network we have. And that's why I joined HSC after I graduated college, is I kind of wish I knew that there were these networks that could support students and connect you to other students that might feel the same loneliness that you do. Right now, I might have 15 or 20 conversations with students that have reached out to HSC that are saying, well, I can't start a chapter because there's no one at my school that wants to start one with me, but I'm so much more confident in myself being part of just even a WhatsApp group with 50 other students that, you know, are in the same boat as me, right? And that gives me a lot of energy to hear that that person struggled so much to find this group. We have to offer them something. So that's what I would tell students on campuses, that if you do feel that loneliness, like Jminji said, be okay with your doubts, but, you know, continue to, don't let that discourage you from calling yourself Hindu or looking for the organization that you want to be a part of.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Nitikaji.
So very similar. I was going to talk about authenticity, but I think being confident in your doubts is something that we've talked about a little bit already here. So one of the things that if I was going to go back to university, I'd remind myself that no matter how big, no matter how small, I do something. I do something that I could thank myself today for having done it, whether it was something which was outwardly Hindu, whether it was something that was just bringing together other like-minded people, just anything, something that I do something which I think was fun for me and a few of my friends. Even if no one else participated, I'd learn something out of it. I'd turn away, even if the whole lecture theatre was empty. That's okay. I have learned something. I've had fun, and we had lots of food which was left over. That's okay. We're students. We can eat it for a few days. That's okay. But just do something that, I'm not going to say how many years on after university, but so that myself today would actually thank me for what I had done when I was at university, to look back and say, actually, we did that, we started that, and that's helped build a stronger foundation for someone else. I was alone at university. I was struggling. I knew there were other people that were lonely, but then I did something. I helped bring about change. I was the change that I wanted. And I didn't say to someone, you should or we should. I asked myself what I could, and I did that. So do that.
Thank you very much. Lastly, Drishtiji, what advice would you give yourself?
I think I shared the same look that all of us shared when you asked this question. To university, you know, I think I could so relate to everything that's just been said. Interesting experience. I went to a small university where it was even difficult to set up a Hindu society. So we started off as an Eastern philosophy society, and then, you know, we gained traction by attracting people from a non-Indian background, you know, very many people from a non-Indian background, exploring dharma, and then being able to actually launch it as a Hindu society and affiliating to the NHSF. So that was a really interesting journey. And when I think back to that time, the first phrase that came to my mind, Shyamji, when you asked this question is, to be Hindu is to be a Sikha. And when we look at, you know, the 3 years, the 4 years that fly by at university, we all know that we're going to graduate being really rich, full of experiences. You'll have internships across the summer. You'll dive into lots of things that will be an investment in you. university is an investment in you. It's an investment into experiences that you can have if you're away from home in a different environment that's, you know, alive with questions, curiosity, things that you can only do when you bring together lots of academics and lots of students in a different environment. But at the end of it, you'll have invested in yourself in so many ways. I think the question that really rings out to me is, when will you, and when do you get the opportunity to invest in your sanskars? When do you get the opportunity to invest in understanding and learning your history? When do you get to invest in your spiritual education? If it's not at university, when you're in an environment for learning, when will it be? And so I guess my advice would be, you know, to really take your time at university, to explore, to dive in and, you know, be able to be a healthy skeptic, but also to embrace new experiences. Don't be too selective. Really educate yourself and come out with an all-rounded education, because if we don't ask those questions and if we don't seek clarity to be able to live authentically, and I think that word authentically is so important, who will? You know, who will tell our story if it is not us? Who will speak for the values that we treasure, like liberty and pluralism, if it's not us? Who will represent our heritage if we don't live it, or if we don't, you know, seek to get those experiences that will help us live it? Things like yoga, dhyan, who will own them? Who will represent them? And who will dive in deep to them? So I think authenticity, a richness of experience, but then also knowing that this is yours. This is your investment to make. So make a good one, and you know, don't hold back.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, T.H.E.S.E, and thank you to all our panelists for those wonderful sentiments to leave us all on. Unfortunately, I think that brings us to the end of our time today. I would have loved to have carried on this discussion, but that's all we have time for. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank all of you for joining us today, all of our panelists for joining us today. And this whole discussion has been really riveting for me to think about and to actually look ahead to what the future holds, not only for the organizations who are represented on this panel, but for the future Hindu student leaders and the future landscape of Hindus in the world. As I mentioned at the start of this session, this was just one session which has been hosted by NHSF UK as part of the Hindu Experience Students Edition. If you do want to catch up on any of the sessions that have been conducted throughout the weekend, they will continue to be on NHSF website, so www.nhsf.org.uk/these-2020, but also on our YouTube channel. So definitely go and check out some of the sessions if you missed them, both today's and yesterday's. I'd like to leave you with a pranam and a namaste. Thank you very much for joining.